all cells, whether prokaryotic or eukaryotic, have common features, and this particular video focuses on one very important feature which is common to all cells, and that is a cell membrane that forms a boundary around the cell. So here are two cells, and in fact they're human cells, cheek cells from the inside of the mouth, and you can see that each of them has a boundary around the outside of them, and that is the cell membrane. Cell membranes are a little bit harder to see in plant cells, particularly well-hydrated plant cells, because plant cells also have a cell wall surrounding them, and often that cell membrane is pressed right up against that cell wall so you cannot see it. Now, cell membranes are comprised majoritively of phospholipid molecules, and you can break a phospholipid molecule up into two different parts, the head and the tail. The tail is basically made of two fatty acid molecules, whereas the head is made of glycerol, a phosphate group, and a polar molecule. This gives the phospholipid some very important characteristics, particularly in water. For example, the head is hydrophilic, which basically means hydro is water and philic means loving. So the head loves water. Whereas the tail, on the other hand, is hydrophobic, phobic meaning fearful, so it doesn't like water. Now the hydrophobic nature of the tail of a phospholipid and the hydrophilic nature of its head gives it very special properties in water. Basically, when you drop phospholipid molecules into water, they spontaneously or automatically arrange themselves into the most energy efficient organization they can, which is a phospholipid bilayer. In a bilayer, you basically end up with hydrophilic head groups of each of the two layers exposed to the water, and the hydrophobic tails facing each other, basically trying to minimize contact with the water. From this, a sphere of phospholipids forms the basis of the cell membrane. So one of the key jobs of a cell membrane is to basically separate the cytoplasm from the cell's surroundings. Another key function of the cell membrane is to basically transport substances into and out of the cell and regulate that. The cell needs important nutrients to survive, but it also has to get rid of certain waste products that could be toxic to the cell. Cell membranes also receive and respond to external stimuli. Cell membranes consist of more than just phospholipids. In fact, they have proteins embedded in the membrane, and that's often why they're called the fluid mosaic model. Mosaic as in consisting of more than one type of structure, and fluid because the structure actually can move. It's not like it's a fixed membrane where the phospholipids and the proteins are fixed in one spot. They can actually move around the membrane. Now, one of the most important types of proteins that is actually embedded in a membrane is a transport protein. And this is really important because it's able to move water-soluble molecules and ions in or out of the cell. Why is that important? Well, basically, because you have that hydrophilic tail on the phospholipid, it prevents water or anything that can dissolve in water, water-soluble substances, to be able to pass through the membrane. It stops that. And so important things such as glucose, in order for them to actually get into the cell, they have to go through transport proteins, which do the majority of the cell's work. And you'll find those in both plant and animal cells, those transport proteins. Now, carbohydrates or sugar chains attach themselves to the outside of proteins in animal cells, and they're very important for cell-to-cell communications and molecule transport across membranes. They help to facilitate the transport of molecules. The other thing you'll find in animal cells that you won't find in plant cells is cholesterol, and that basically provides stability and reduces the permeability of the membrane to small water-soluble molecules. In other words, it just makes it more waterproof. So these images illustrate the difference between the cell membrane of an animal and a plant cell. You can see that both of them have a phospholipid bilayer, but only the animal cell actually has cholesterol to provide strength and structure to the membrane, as well as sugar molecules attached to the proteins that are embedded in the fluid mosaic. The plant cell, on the other hand, has neither the cholesterol nor the sugar molecules or carbohydrates attached to the proteins. It does, however, have a cell wall on the outside of the cell membrane.